All right, on the mark, listeners, viewers, you're on YouTube. You know me; I'm very holistic in my approach to game improvement. And here recently, I found Andrew Reynolds. And Andrew, I was glued to your Instagram feed for a while, so I'm glad you would join us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Mark. Yeah, long time listener to the podcast.
Well, well, I'm honored. Thank you. You got some really good stuff here. In the interests of for folks who have not seen you on social or worked with you, please introduce yourself. Tell us about who you are and how you came to where you currently are.
Yeah, thanks. So, my name's Andrew Reynolds. I'm a cognitive performance coach. So, my background is in psychology and sports psychology, and I use that background to help golfers to firstly make the most of their practice time,
Yeah.
to transfer some of those benefits from their practice out onto the golf course. So, rather than be somebody that can just hit the ball great on the driving range, actually be able to produce that better golf out on the course. And then with some of the more traditional parts of the mental game. So
Yeah.
handling pressure, handling nerves, that kind of stuff.
It begs the question, how obviously you're a golfer, athlete,
Yes.
coach in a way. Were you always into this line of instruction, or was this because I'll tell you honestly, with me, I was a player turned teacher. The more I taught elite golfers of all skill levels, the more I began to realize that it's more than just the golf swing. So how did you get to this lane that you're in?
Yeah, an interesting path to it actually. Like I've always been a golfer. It started with a quest to improve my own golf game. So just to simply try and get better, it kind of starts with, for me, it started with reading Bob Rotella books. Putting out of your mind and golf is not a game of perfect, that kind of thing. And that's where it kind of began. And early in my 20s, I found myself actually in your home country, Mark. I was out in South Africa for a few months, shadowing a coach out there. You may or may not know him, Doug Wood.
Yeah.
He gave me the opportunity to shadow him. And whilst I was out there, I kind of essentially was in the same place as a lot of kind of Sunshine Tour players and that kind of thing. I wasn't of that level myself, but was in their presence. And
Mhm.
I found that just from speaking to them, that a lot of the stuff that I'd kind of come across by working on my own game, it was stuff that wasn't really known as well, even by such elite golfers.
Mhm.
And it meant that I ended up just kind of talking to these guys kind of about this. I wasn't coaching them by any means at all, just conversations, playing golf with these people, talking to them about pre-shot routines and kind of preparing for rounds and visualization and stuff like that. And that kind of sent me down a path of realizing actually it's something that I'm quite interested in myself.
Mhm.
So I came back to the UK after my period of time out there and just kind of looked into, how do I go about kind of making this thing what I do? So I went back to university, studied psychology, did a master's degree, then also did a master's degree in sports psychology, did those two things. And yeah, just essentially started to use that to help golfers.
You know what I hear, and I'm sure the viewers and listeners to this are kind of taking a breath right now, going, you know what? It's not just me that struggles with this sort of stuff. Because look, I work on the PGA Tour, and I can tell you, golfers listening, viewing, even they struggle with things that you do. They've just kind of learned the skills to navigate their way around it, and they're nervous as well. I want to ask you this because in your bio, and this is the thing that kind of caught my attention. You're like, I help golfers perform under pressure, and I'm like,
Hmm.
hmm, yes. And then I thought about this further because there's this kind of undercurrent, assumption, really. It's like, yeah, under pressure, my skills, my game, whatever it is going to diminish some. And I was like, everyone sort of expects that. And as a golf instructor, deep down, I'd expect a player not to perform as well under pressure, a club golfer, sometimes the elite golfer. And it made me wonder why. Like, why don't we perform well under pressure? So I'd love you to kick us off there and just help us understand, because I feel like that's a good jumping off point.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. And I think I think the sooner as golfers that we kind of embrace that actually pressure has an effect on our performance, the quicker we can do something about it, and the better we're going to be prepared for that situation. Like you say there, I think you said something great there, and all golfers, regardless of the level, I think what some recreational golfers don't actually realize is that some of the best golfers in the world, or almost all the best golfers in the world, are going to be nervous at some point. It's actually just a human response, a human emotion. It's just the ability to build the skills to handle it. But to your question there, Mark, of what causes pressure and why is it that performance does dip when under pressure, it's one word, and that's consequence. By having consequence on a shot that we hit, that is the thing that instigates pressure. And I like to think of it in an example of, if you're walking down a pavement, a sidewalk, you would never ever think about falling off either side of that sidewalk. Even though there's cars driving past you on one side, there might be some bushes on the other side. But if you had a bridge that was that same width across a canyon and there was no sides to that bridge, you would not be able to walk along that in the same way because there's that consequence there. So your brain goes, be super careful, make sure you're safe. And all of a sudden you kind of go onto high alert. And this is what pressure does to us on the golf course. When there's threats in our environment, we go onto that high alert state and our brain is actively seeking safety. And that's where we find us in a pressure situation. That's what causes those feelings of pressure.
Yeah, I got you. And you speak of threats, the visceral threats are like bunkers and water hazards and stuff like that. But I'm guessing now, maybe educated guess here, please correct me or elaborate, that the threat is like, all right, I'm out here, I'm unsure, I'm going to perform poorly, and then all of the stuff I got to deal with not having played well. Is that kind of the nucleus of all of the stuff?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Like the threats can be and absolutely are, out of bounds stakes, water hazards, difficult shots that kind of don't suit our eye. But some of the stuff that causes even more pressure is kind of threats to our ego, threats to kind of how we're feeling. So the people we're playing with, the match situation, feeling one up or one down on the final tee is going to make you feel a different way based on just the score, even though that physical surrounding is exactly the same. But yeah, absolutely. I would actually say that those other things are the things that we perceive as bigger threats than just the physical ones of a water hazard or some out of bounds.
And now that you elaborate as you do, it almost gets me to thinking that as far as the mental game goes and sort of dealing with said threats and then performing, it's almost harder in golf because there's so much time off. Like if I'm running around on a soccer field or whatever, and I'm playing tennis, there's continual movement, we engaged, right? But then between shots, because golf, you're out there for 4.5 hours or whatever, and you're only busy for a few minutes hitting shots and stuff. So it's actually
100%.
you've got to be more organized mentally. It's beginning to occur to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. In some of those other sports, soccer, tennis, whatever it may be, they're very reactionary sports. We rely a lot on our subconscious, our unconscious mind to essentially just provide the movements that are required to complete them. We have our eyes on a ball where other players are on the pitch, and a lot of those kind of calculations happen very automatically, particularly for highly skilled players. But exactly as you say in golf, we've got multiple minutes in between each shot, which gives us an awful lot of time to start thinking about plenty of other things.
Love it. Okay, folks, on his Instagram feed, there was a tip on how to play more subconscious golf. It was actually a sweet drill. But I want to start here. You talked about neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And because you can rewire your brain to certain, you can rewire neural pathways and why they're so important. So I feel like we need to start here. If we're going to start to take our practice game to the course and deal with pressure better and perform under pressure a little better, I think we understand how our brain works and we're on the way. So why don't you help us?
Absolutely, yeah. So you bring up neural pathways there, and the understanding of what a neural pathway is is really key when understanding how to get better at golf, and also how to get better at golf,
Mm-hmm.
and also how to transfer it over to the golf course and into a pressure situation. So a neural pathway is essentially the route within our brain that is activated whenever we complete a particular task. So our golf-related neural pathways are the route within our brain. Information travels when we have a golf club in our hand and when we're hitting golf shots. And the more quickly that information can move, then the better at that skill we're going to be. So what we'd call that is a stronger neural pathway. There's a great book that explains this whole process called The Talent Code, and I'd recommend everybody that's interested in this kind of stuff read that. And the understanding that strengthening neural pathways is the thing that helps you to improve a skill underpins everything related to high quality practice. So if we want to strengthen a neural pathway, what we need to do is we need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone in practice. So the more that we can push ourselves in practice, we have to solve new and increasingly more difficult problems. And it's this problem-solving process that helps to strengthen those neural pathways. And then what happens at a neurological level is they get wrapped in a protein called myelin, and that strengthens it and helps that information to move more quickly.
You use the term, fascinating, by the way, you use the term comfort level. And it's amazing how I see golfers where, mentally, I want to not say panic, but it's kind of some mayhem going on in the head. And they're so used to that's almost like that pathway has been created. So if there's no worry or concern or whatever, and they are outside of that kind of free flowing, they start to wonder, okay, when are things going to start going wrong again? Am I jiving here, or am I sort of crazy in this observation?
As in, kind of like, even if things are going well,
Yes,
that a
it's like
golfer's
this.
actually thinking potentially, when's the disaster coming? No, I think that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely a pattern that as golfers, I'm a golfer myself too, that definitely can be the case, especially in parts of the game that maybe a golfer isn't quite as confident with. Something I see a lot in golfers is if someone's, say, a very good driver of the golf ball, but maybe struggles with the putter, it may be that they can hit a bad shot with the driver and there's still no thought that that's going to have any permanence. It's going to last any time at all.
Mhm.
The panic doesn't really set in. It's kind of like, okay, that was a bad one, but the next one will be fine. Whereas if they were to hit a bad 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot putt, and it's the area that maybe they're slightly less confident in, I definitely see that as a place where that kind of thought pattern can start.
It's amazing. There's a regression to the mean with golfers too. I was a college golf coach for 20 something years, and I would almost bet my bank account on the fact that if some kid comes out and shoots 67 in the first round and his stroke average is 74, he's going to find a way to sort of get back to 74 eventually, because 67 is not uncharted territory, but it's like, oh goodness, is this really me? And I guess that's where the mental battle is, because that's where you got to start convincing yourself that this is now why you put the work in. Yes.
100%. And that's an example of, that golfer finding themselves, way out of their comfort zone when they've shot a score that is kind of way above their expectations. And I think something that makes me think of there, you saying that as a person regressing towards their kind of mean, finding a way of kind of creating their stroke averages. I like to view, with all the golfers that I work with, that actually what their current level of golf is a is a representation of their skill level. So if we think about these neural pathways, the golf that they produce, their scoring average, their handicap, whatever it is, that's a representation of where their skill level is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the way that we get that golfer to a lower scoring average, a lower handicap, win more competitions, whatever it is that goal that golfer has, is we just make sure we're doing everything that we possibly can to increase that skill level, to strengthen those neural pathways, so that inconsistent in that inconsistency and regression to the mean just starts to regress to a lower mean over time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm going to hit you from left field here. I know lots of golfers. Heck, we've all been there. Because golf is riddled with barriers. You know, it's break 100, and on your Instagram page, you have easy ways to break 100, etc., etc. And everyone's got this barrier to break. And I see countless golfers like they're looking now to break 80, and they through 16 holes and they are 6 over par, and a couple pars and they're shooting 78 kind of thing, and then they'll find a way to stumble to the finish. Is this fitting along the same sort of a description?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that as much comes into some of the more like kind of traditional mental game sides of it as well. You know, what is it that that golfer is saying to themselves on that 16th, 17th tee? Because what we'll probably see is that for the first 15 holes, that golfer probably hasn't thought too much about what they're doing. They're just hitting the shot that's in front of them. They're obviously playing nicely, so it's kind of flowing well. They're not sort of giving themselves a bit of a lecture before each shot. And then all of a sudden, when they realize, oh, I can see the finish line, maybe that internal conversation just changes a little bit, and it goes, come, just keep it steady, just keep it going. And when it's that little change in how we kind of speak to ourselves, all of a sudden we can take ourselves out of that lovely flow that we were in leading up to that point.
It's amazing, the value of staying present. Okay, let's get into it. That's kind of the cerebral element of it. And now you got some. So I'm going to hit you with just a few observations that you've made and ask you to describe. There's so many practical things that you have that people can improve their performance. And the first one was a course management hack. And you know, if I had to sort of summarize your account, I'd be like, there's a heck of a lot of course management stuff in here. So you don't go and do dumbass stuff on your way to breaking your barrier. And the one was, it was a tweet of sorts. And you're like, consider this course management hack. The penalty for hitting it in a fairway bunker is a half a stroke. In a penalty area or hazard is 1.5 strokes. Penalty area is 1.5 strokes, and a hazard is 2. So I want you to talk about that, because I looked at this tweet and I was like, okay, yeah, I see the fairway and I see the fairway bunker, and then I see the water over there, and I feel hemmed in. And so I make a defensive swing. But if I look at this and go, pure math of this says if I hit in the fairway bunker, I'm only going to lose a half a stroke. If I hit the thing over there, I'm going to lose 1.5. So it's sort of, this will almost in a way allow me to swing more freely. Is this what you were intending with that tweet there?
So the way I like to use kind of strokes gained information, you know, this is where that's kind of gleaned from. The way I like to use strokes gained information when it comes to course management, when it comes to on-course strategy, is just to understand what each spot on the golf course kind of represents as a risk. So, and then rather than just thinking, okay, here's problems, and, you know, like you say, everything just feels hemmed in. It's more a case of, right, what's the right strategy that takes as many of these things out of play without costing me too much with regards to expected strokes. So, you know, it may be that there's some holes where the water, the out of bounds of the bunker is in play. It's a 480-yard par 4. You know, hitting a 4-iron off that tee isn't going to cut it. So we've just got to try and hit driver into a tough spot. And, you know, that is absolutely something that sometimes on the golf course, we've just got to stand up and commit to a shot that we kind of don't love the look of. But at the same time as that, if it were maybe a hole where there was the option to be like, okay, that bunker on the right-hand side, that's 245 off the tee. I'm going to hit a shot up the right side that won't get past 235. And if it's a hole where that, you know, if it's a, you know, a sub 400-yard par 4, that means that we can maybe give up 0.1 shots in distance by just coming back a few yards, hitting a 3-wood, hitting a 5-wood, whatever the club is that gets to that point, but actually not risk losing the half shot or the 1.5 or the 2. So I like to see it as basically giving up distance. And this maybe goes more to recreational golfers, because a lot of these hazards are more in play for them because their dispersion is going to be wider. But actually giving up 20 or 30 yards may only give up 0.1 or 0.2, whereas losing a golf ball gives up two shots essentially. So we've kind of got to hit it that 20 yards further 10 times to net off in the same place as losing that ball.
You know what I love, and I misspoke, folks, forgive me. It was a fairway bunker will cost you a half a stroke, a penalty area costs you 1.5 strokes, and a lost ball will cost you 2 strokes. That was correct. I transcribed it poorly. But what I love what you do here is that if you listen to the strokes gained police, they're going to tell you just blast it as far down the fairway as what you possibly can. And you had this funny image that I actually laughed out loud at. And it was this guy going, public service announcement. And the announcement was, yes, if you can't hit the ball squarely in the driver face, don't try and go on a speed regimen. Because you're right, it's easier to play from the fairway.
It is, and you know, that meme there, yeah, it's something that, you know, speed training's very much had a lot of popularity in recent times, and you know, it works incredibly well for some people. You know, any person that's seen Bryson DeChambeau hit a golf ball in person knows how, you know, impressive that is and what effect it's kind of had. You know, some of the stuff on speed training, especially for anyone but the top 1% of golfers, to be completely honest, I just view it as it's not the lowest hanging fruit. And actually, if technique isn't in a place that can handle the extra speed, it's kind of like putting a bigger engine in a car that's got no wheels or no brakes. It's just not really gonna end well. It's going to end up with more shots offline, worse strikes, maybe not even more distance, and you know, even potentially injury if we take it even that far.
You're preaching, Reverend Reynolds. With love to all of the power guys. Look, we talk about it all over here, but there's a reality to it. And yeah, swinging at 5 miles an hour faster, if you can't square the thing up and find the fairway, it's useless to you.
100%. And also too, with regards to that kind of get it as close to the green as possible strategy, I think you know, if you're Rory McIlroy, you know, for somebody that hits it as far as he does, he's incredibly accurate. You know, that dispersion cone, when you think the point that it passes a mere mortal's drive, it's at a way narrower point than it would be for almost all golfers that hit it, you know, 60, 80 yards shorter. So a lot of those hazards and out of bounds stakes, they're not as in play for somebody who's as highly skilled as Rory McIlroy or Victor Hovland, or you know, whoever it is that may use a strategy of getting it down into what would be perceived as tight spots. But a lot of the time too, a lot of this advice is kind of thinking, the way I look at it is like, does that advice actually go and pass down as well to golfers who aren't that top 0.00001%? And actually, if we break down the numbers, we see that what we actually give up in a expected strokes gained of, you know, 20 yards here, 30 yards here, whatever it is, actually the trade-off for that extra little bit of yardage often isn't really worth it when we consider what the cost is of the hazards you may then find.
I love it. Just to put a bow on the conversation, we've had Bryson DeChambeau on the show, and he said categorically at the start of the whole thing when I asked him, he goes, look, on the speed journey I went on, my first port of call was always accuracy. And I got to tell you, he is surprisingly accurate to your Rory observation for as hard as what he hits it. And then what these guys are able to do is they will be able to go fast, but sort of eliminate one side of the target too. So if there's a bunch of Kingdom Come down the left-hand side, they're going fast, but the face is not looking there when they make contact. So there's that's brought to bear too. Okay, so that's a course management thing. But now I want to bring you back to the first tee, because I know lots and lots and lots of people that struggle with first tee nerves, can almost be debilitating at times. Even before the first tee, you know, the night before the big day, you know, where our minds are running rampant and stuff. And we almost scuttle the day before we even hit the first tee shot. So help us a little bit there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a place where a lot of golfers of all levels are going to feel a lot of nerves. I think a lot of it comes back to embracing that it's okay to be nervous, that every golfer is nervous at some point. And actually, one of the biggest things is we can make our nerves and the panic even more and higher if we tell ourselves we shouldn't be nervous at all. Whereas actually, if we're able to remind ourselves that nerves are okay, then it actually helps to kind of normalize the situation a little bit. So I'd say that's the first thing, just being aware of kind of how we're talking to ourselves on that front. The warm-up is then important. I think if we mix first tee nerves with a lack of a warm-up, that's a bit of a recipe for disaster too, because we're kind of standing there feeling pretty nervous, and we haven't hit any shots, we haven't used our routine for anything beforehand. So I think during that warm-up, it's key to kind of pick a few targets and make sure we're actually warming up our routines as well as actually just warming up physically. And then the other thing would be just making sure that we've got a really, really strong pre-shot routine. So my kind of shorthand for a really strong pre-shot routine is you go and watch a pro tournament, you're going to see every single player with a different pre-shot routine. You know, we could all pick out the specifics of certain players and their idiosyncrasies in their routine, but three things they're all going to do is they're all going to pick a really specific target, they're all going to visualize the shot that they want to hit, and they're all going to be really committed. So when looking to build a pre-shot routine with a golfer, or if there's any golfers out there that are looking to build a pre-shot routine, if they can focus on doing those three things, then that's going to form a pretty strong pre-shot routine, and you'll probably find your own thing that works for you kind of around that. So yeah, I'd say the biggest keys when it comes to first tee nerves, or even nerves over any particular shots that golfers have out on the course, is make sure that we remind ourselves that nerves are okay, nerves are normal, they're a human emotion, and then also make sure that we warm up and prep well, and then really, really make sure that we use our routine, pick the target, visualize it, and fully commit.
So I'm going to wrap the final two observations into one before we get to the strokes gain stuff. You made the quote that said improving the mental game is a lot like building muscle, which I loved, because first off, I don't think people work on the mental game enough. And if they do, it's kind of haphazard. And it's certainly not as hard as what they'd work on their physical game, if indeed they're doing that. And then there was also there's also that situation where, you know, here's me and I'm seeing Andrew Reynolds and I'm working on my game and I'm working on my mental game and I've got my routine and I'm just doing all the right things, but I'm just not making any headway. So I want you to advise me and people like that, but then talk about this quip where you said it's like building muscle, because I think that is a wonderful way of describing it.
Absolutely, yeah. And that it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about the whole kind of needing to push ourselves out of our comfort zone to increase skill, and also to be able to transfer our good golf from practice to a competitive situation. And the way I like to look at it is, in the gym, to build muscle, we need to push ourselves past what is comfortable. So if a 12-kilogram dumbbell is comfortable, we need to try and lift the 14-kilogram one until that one becomes comfortable, and then we do the 16-kilogram one. And we're just constantly pushing ourselves just that little bit past our comfort zone. And then as a result of that, muscle is built. And it's exactly the same when it comes to skill. It's just that we don't do it with weight. We do it with difficulty and variation and challenge. So what we need to do is push ourselves past what is comfortable, in the sense of hitting lots and lots of varied shots. So different clubs at different targets, i.e. not repeating the same shot over and over again. We need to push ourselves by creating competitive situations, adding a bit of consequence to the shots that we're hitting. You know, the biggest thing I say to people a lot is, actually, we need to practice a little bit more like we did when we were kids. You know, if you put a load of juniors around a chipping or a putting green, none of them are getting a training aid or a plane stick out. They're all saying, who wants a chipping comp? Who wants a putting comp? And they're all competing with each other. And actually, they're getting more high quality practice done than the guy that's got his mirror out and got the stick down and working on that type of thing, because they're pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. They're grinding over 3-foot putts. They're putting the ball behind a bush and trying to hit a flop shot over it. All these different things that push us out of our comfort zone. So yeah, that's where the quote with regards to it's like building muscle. It's just finding ways to make our practice challenging, make it novel, make it varied, and that really helps us to build skill and strengthen those neural pathways.
Mm-hmm. And now I'm doing all the right stuff, but I'm not seeing the scores just yet. Help me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when that happens with guys, it comes down to looking at, right, okay, where like let's look at every single little part and look to identify exactly kind of what's going on. So we might look at their stats and say, okay, is there a particular part where somebody is losing strokes, so whether that's off the tee, whether that's approach, short game putting, whatever it might be. Is it just in competitions where it's happening, or is it, not so good in practice and in competition? How's practice structure looking? Are we getting a bit stuck in technical practice and not moving on to our random practice and our competitive practice drills? How routines are out on the golf course? I'd be sort of going through all of these things and just kind of looking to see, right, what might be the cause for that improvement not to be happening. And it could be something to do with what I do with the golfer. It could be putting together some kind of like a bit of a plan of action where we kind of look to solve the problem via another coach or another route, whether it's say a putting coach or a swing coach or whatever it might be. Or it could just be as simple as there's often a lag when it comes to developing skill, just as when we're in the gym. Sometimes somebody could lift weights for a month, nothing's happening. And then you fast forward 3 or 6 months later and they're much, much stronger and much, much fitter. So yeah, that would be my thought pattern in that situation.
I'm cognizant of time, but I have to ask this follow-up. I would almost say too that the golfer who we're helping now has also perhaps got to look at the results with a different perspective. Because we are graded by the number on the bottom of our scorecard, but you could go out there and kind of do everything right and then have like 1 or 2 aberrations, and all of a sudden the score is not manifesting really what's been going on. So perhaps it's a change of attitude as you look at what's going on too.
100%, 100%. Score is, as much as we would love it to be, it's just something that's not fully in our control. We can thin a 7-iron and it goes to 3 feet. We can flush a 7-iron and get a wind gust and it plugs in a bunker, and that's a bad shot to a good shot, being a big swing in the overall score. And actually a golfer's ability to actually reflect on their game in more than just score. So what did I go out there to do today? And did I stick to that plan regardless of what the score was? That's something that's so important when it comes to having a strong mental game and being able to stay calm in those pressure situations.
Yeah, our most recent podcast with the PGA Tour winner Ryan Brem, one of the things he said is you got to love the process over the results, which is so hard. Okay, I want to do this. It's a tweet that I'm looking for right now. 5 ways you can use strokes gain to lower your scores. I thought this was very clever, and I reached out to you because I live in an industry as an announcer where people can find a statistic to massage any point they're trying to make.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the real wisdom is really diving into the numbers, and you did that. And so you've got 5 ways to lower scores using strokes gained. And the first one is avoid lost golf balls. Now, this seems like logical, but you say hitting a drive 20 yards farther will gain you approximately 0.1 of a shot. A lost ball costs you 1.5 to 2 strokes. Distance is helpful, but not at the expense of lost balls. So is this also going with different clubs off tees or something to that effect? Or is it just the culmination of let's put the ball in play and let's go from there?
Absolutely. So it can come in a variety of different ways. It could be a lesser club, so giving up that small amount of yardage as we were talking about earlier. It could be choosing a different target. So it may be that actually we want to play more towards the safer side of the hole. You referenced earlier about taking one side out. If there's OB one side and rough the other, maybe the center point of our kind of zone we want to go into is actually the left edge of the fairway versus just the kind of center point that brings more into play. And also it comes into the skill portion of it too, because actually the more skillful we are, the less likely we are to to kind of spray it and lose golf ball. So we can actually be that bit more aggressive. But yeah, in this example here, it's looking at it going, okay, do I actually need to really try and get that extra, whether it's an extra 20 yards out of this drive or hit driver instead of 3-wood, or the more aggressive play, and actually embracing that 20 yards is only gaining us a very small amount on the scorecard. And if there's a strong chance of that ball going out of bounds or into water hazard, actually the safe play in that situation makes a lot of statistical sense.
Also, just got to hit the shot you're comfortable with. I'm
Yeah.
around golfers at the highest level, and they recognize strokes gained, but you get on a tee like, "Ooh, I'm just not feeling driver right now. I don't care who I am." Then you got to go with what you know.
Worked
Um,
pretty well for Henrik Stenson, right?
yeah, no kidding. The second one is prioritize greens in regulation. You write from 20 yards on the green, a PGA Tour averages 2.21 shots. From 20 yards in the rough, a PGA Tour player averages 2.59 shots. So that's you missing the target by 20 yards, okay, 60 feet. And then you're in the fairway versus or on the green somewhere from long range or in the rough. That's a significant distance. And you basically say, just be careful with short sides and those tucked pins.
100%, 100%. And it's the way I look at this almost is a shot that's 20 yards away on the green or 20 yards away in the rough is essentially the same quality of shot. The only thing that matters is where our target is. So if there's a tuck pin, and by going to that pin, we bring in a side of the green that may leave a rough lie, then actually it makes so much sense to just shift our target so that our dispersion is over as much of the green as we possibly can. Because, and this goes through all skill levels, the numbers here of PGA Tour players, but it's the same ratio when it comes to recreational golfers as well. Having the ball on the putting surface is just so important when it comes to scoring. Greens and two putt pars really are our friend as golfers.
Mm-hmm. So then you do make the smart play and you hit it on the green. Then it says you're putting from 3 to 12 feet. Outside of 12 feet, no matter how well you roll the ball, it's difficult to hold a high percentage of putts. But you hold 2 or more 8-foot putts per round and you've gained an entire stroke. Are you talking to us about what you practice as well, or what's your take here?
Yeah, that's what this one is aimed at. Is in, if we've got time to spend on our putting practice, getting better in this range 3 to 12 feet is going to be way more fruitful than rolling our 18, 20, 25 footers that tiny bit better. Don't get me wrong. If our pace control from that distance is not good, then we absolutely need to work on that point. But as an opportunity to gain strokes, whether we're 16 feet away, 25 feet away, the expected number of shots doesn't really change too much in that range. But as we get inside that 3 to 12 foot range, we've actually got an opportunity to gain some strokes by getting very good in that area. So I'm a believer that spending a lot of our time working on 3 to 12 foot putts and then some time spent lag putting is a really good way to focus on our putting practice.
Yeah, action points. I love it. Then number 4 of 5, chipping proximity. 50% of up and down at 50% up and down success is elite level performance, you say. A 50% success rate on the green is an 8-foot putt. This is from the PGA Tour stats. So in other words, if you can chip it inside of 8 feet, you're raising your chances, correct?
100%, or even chip it to 8 feet. I like to think of it as around the greens. We're almost, if we can hit a chip shot to 8 feet, that's just a strokes gained 0 shot. And a strokes gained 0 shot is never, ever a bad thing. So rather than feeling like we have to chip every single green side shot to 3 feet, otherwise we're not chipping it well. Actually, the strokes we've lost are probably in hitting it to that point where it's not on the green. So actually then hitting that chip shot to 8 feet is not a bad shot at all. And actually what I really like on that front is if we're chipping to a difficult pin, maybe one that's on a tier or on a point where we have to be really dicey with with trying to, hit a high flop or something like that to get it to that really tuck point.
Mhm.
Actually, if we embrace, right, there's this big 8-foot circle around this pin. All I'm trying to do is get it somewhere in there. Normally, what we see is that there's probably an easier option available that's going to mean that we take the disaster out. It's going to take out the one where we try to hit the flop and we go straight under and it goes a couple of yards, or we get it slightly the wrong side of the tier and it runs down far away. Actually, just by the spot in that 8-foot zone that we can go for actually ends up as the better option.
That's the key. Big number avoidance. I love that. Okay, the final one, and I'll let you go. The winner is the best putter of all the best ball strikers. This is true at every level. Yes, where it's misunderstood. People hear this and they're like, yeah, so I'm going to go and hit the ball better. Heck, my daughter said this to me the other day. She goes, I'm not hitting my irons close enough. I'm like, well, you hardly still are on the greens right now. So the point you make is like, look, the winner is the person who puts the best out of all the best strikers. So don't go and go to sleep on your putting and your short game practice.
It's a fascinating this one, I think. Like if we, the old saying, drive for show, putt for dough, we've all heard it, and it's now been demonstrated very, very well that it's just wrong. You look at the top 10 in the world, top 10 on the PGA Tour, top 10 anywhere. It's the best ball strikers that fill that point. The best with the best strokes gained off the tee, the best strokes gained approach numbers. Those guys are consistently near the top. But the interesting twist on it, the interesting thing that we see is actually then winning. So actually being the one that actually comes first, because it's almost as if the ball striking gets that golfer to that elite level. And then it's the one that's able to gain the most strokes of the guys that are hitting it at that level that then wins the tournament, which then leads to something that we see in pro golf is that almost the people that putt well almost win more than they should. Like they kind of have that ability when they're really hot
Yeah.
to win tournaments. And sometimes we see that some of the guys who's maybe putting isn't up there with the kind of best of the best, their careers are unbelievable from a consistency level, loads of top tens, loads of top fives. And maybe, and it's impossible to say this as if it's a bad thing, but they don't have that kind of like over and above kind of winning record that maybe somebody who can get super hot with a putter does have.
Well, look no further than two of the top three players in the world right now in Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. And this was recorded in 2024. If you're listening to this down the track, both dynamite ball strikers. Scheffler was substandard on the greens. When he turned that around, then he became unbeatable. I mean, he went on a tear that is biblical. So yeah, but your point is so well founded. So I guess the marching orders you would give folks is like, go and make practice count. Is that what you're telling us?
100%. If we wanted to run a marathon time quicker, we'd go out there and we'd train multiple times a week and make sure that our training was spot on. So as golfers, my message is to let's treat our golf game the same way that anyone training towards something would, and let's just get high quality practice in as much and as often as possible.
Now, listen, you've got some very cool, you offer like courses and stuff, 8-week, 5-week courses and that. Please tell the golfers where they can find you, where they can find more stuff on that.
Yes. So yeah, I'm on Instagram, pretty active on there, kind of posting stuff at the Cog Coach. And then if you head to thecogcoach.com, there's all sorts of bits and pieces on there too.
And Cog is COG. Andrew, tremendous stuff, man. Keep up the great work. I'm so glad you would join us because, we've all kind of known it, but people discount the fact that you have to work on your game mentally and you have to make your practice count, even if it's limited. We don't have to go and wear out the practice area. We just got to make our time count. Yes.
Absolutely. 2 to 3 hours a week. If we can fit it in somewhere, we can make some serious improvements to our games.
Commit to that, people. He's speaking. Hey, listen, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me.